Mr. Dinh La Thang, the indictment is not music, but everywhere, La Thang. In the self-defense section, Mr. Thang denied the role of mastermind as the prosecution's impeachment attributed. Mr. Thang strongly reacted to the indictment, attaching him to many contents that he considered not his responsibility. On March 11, the trial of Mr. Dinh La Thang, former chairman of the board of directors of Vietnam Oil and Gas Group, PVN, and 11 accomplices in the case occurred at the Phú Thomas ethanol project, continued the debate. The court spent most of the morning showing Mr. Thang presenting his self-defense and his attorney's response. Defending Mr. Thang, lawyer Hong Van Huong gave many analyses confirming that Mr. Thang did not commit a crime violating the regulations on construction investment, causing serious consequences as accused by the procuracy. According to the lawyer, the indictment attributed Mr. Thang despite knowing that PVC is not capable, but still drastically directing to assign the contract to PVC is incorrect. The policy of PVN to direct the representatives of capital contribution of PVB member units to introduce PVC to implement the ethanol biofuel project, stemming from the policy of focusing on increasing service use of units in the industry, has been approved by the board of directors of PVN and approved by the government. Like the interrogation sessions, Mr. Thang firmly denies the charges made by the procuracy. In nearly an hour of self-defense, Mr. Thang repeatedly asked the procuracy to respond with his point of view. Former PVN president said that his name, La and Thang, are the notes and the indictment as a piece of music. There are two notes to blame the defendant for every word. Every sentence here is a prison crime, is compensation. Referring to the testimony of Trinh Nguyen Thanh, Mr. Thang said that it was a voluntary job of PVC to ask for the implementation price of the project. Authority belonged to PVB, not to any other unit. PVC could not agree with PVB and chose another contractor. Yet defendant Trinh Nguyen Thanh said that the bid for $59 million was directed by PVN. Sorry, Mr. Thang, saying that is to slap him in the mouth, Mr. Thang stated. The chairman reminded the defendant not to say the above statements. When Mr. Thang spoke, Mr. Thang repeatedly raised his hand to speak, but was interrupted by the chairman. I do not agree with the prosecutor's allegations regarding me. I was not allowed to attend the interrogation, but it can be said that after 3 days of trial, the indictment reads the first day and the impeachment statement. Equally nothing will change, Mr. Thang continued to defend. Regarding the conspiracy statement in the case as the chairman of the corporation, the head of the project steering committee, Mr. Thang argues that the implementation of this project is in the overall development of the corporation which has been approved by the Prime Minister. I am the leader, so I do not know how it will be in the future. So I cannot say that I am the mastermind of the case, Mr. Thang explained. Former PVN chairman hypothesized, if I am not the implementer of that project, who will implement it? Defendant Thang asked the procuracy to clarify which group of interests in the case is, who gets how much money. If in the form of every indictment, there is no need to answer, but only the indictment of this case has to respond, Mr. Thang said. Is the base of my accusation satisfactory? Defendant Thang continued to ask VKS to respond if PVN did not implement the government's policy, which unit in the country would implement the project or assign it to a foreign country. I am accused of being the chairman of the board of directors to know the things of my subordinates, but there are things I have no responsibility to know. So the VKS asked what regulations say that the head must know everything. Also the work of the people involved. If you do not clarify this issue, you will not be serious because in other agencies there are many leaders, so what about other projects? They have to go to court like me. Mr. Thang raised the problem. According to Mr. Thang, the indictment attributed despite knowing that PVC has not implemented any project to accuse the defendant is satisfactory or not. The indictment is directed everywhere by Dinh La Thang. Dinh La Thang directs. Thang is just a note, but the indictment is like a song that is responsible for Thang. Every sentence here is. Imprisonment is an episode that must be compensated, not the song, Mr. Thang said. The trial panel interrupted the defendant, reminding Mr. Thang to focus on the defense, not to extend the scope of the case. Regarding the regulations on directing the contract assignment to the PVC joint venture, Mr. Thang proposed the procuracy to issue documents and his related testimony. "I only introduced PVC internally, never introduced a consortium of contractors because this is the authority of the investor. Why is the indictment attached to me everything? PVB is not part of PVN, so it is not true. Present the resolutions, obey PVN. Since then, PVN cannot have authority in deciding contractor selection. I do not replace the investor's duties. Regarding the contractor's capacity, I have no conclusion. At first I knew that PVC offered a price of $87 million, but PVB only offered a price of $59 million. My conclusion is that according to the price of the investor, if you do, you don't do it, you don't have to specify anything," Mr. Thang defended himself. According to Mr. Thang, the reason for the project being suspended is because if you don't have money, you cannot do anything, not just the contractor's capacity. Regarding the damage of the case, the indictment stated that the bank loan interest must be paid. Mr. Thang suggested to see if the bank loaned correctly, in the conditional contract, if the contractor stopped the construction, who would pay the loan interest? According to Mr. Thang, the amount of more than $543 billion of bank interest debt is not the loss of the case. Mr. Thang said that accusing the defendant and others to be responsible for the damage not in accordance with both reason and love. Mr. Thang asked the procuracy to respond, is this a criminalization of economic relations? Because the bank loan is a pure economic relationship, if there are any problems, they will be brought to court to resolve. At the end of the defense, Mr. Thang explained that he went to court for the 6th time, so he expected the procuracy to absorb the defense points and give an answer. According to him, 5 appearances in the cases before the procuracy bring the original indictment to impeachment, so we look forward to an objective response.